The sun was blazing that afternoon, turning the city streets into shimmering rivers of heat. Expensive cars whizzed past, their tinted windows shielding passengers from the struggles of the outside world. But Jamal, the young black millionaire everyone admired for his rags-to-riches story, wasn't thinking about the weather or the latest business deal. He was thinking about his late mother. She had always told him, "No matter how high you climb, son, never forget what it feels like to be down there." Those words echoed in his mind as he drove his sleek black Rolls Royce through the poorer side of town, a place he rarely visited now but could never fully leave behind. Then something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another person begging by the roadside, something sadly common in that part of the city. But as his car rolled closer, his chest tightened. Sitting there, on the edge of the dusty pavement, was a young black woman. Her hair was messy, her clothes were torn, and her feet were bare. She looked like she had been forgotten by the world. But what really made Jamal's heart stop was her belly. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant, and the way she sat, clutching her stomach, told him something was wrong. Jamal slowed his car and pulled over, ignoring the impatient honks of driver behind him. He stepped out his car, his polished shoes crunching against gravel. A few people on the street turned to stare. After all, it wasn't every day a millionaire stepped out of a luxury car in the middle of this rough neighborhood. Jamal approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice was softer than usual, almost careful. The woman looked up, startled. Her big brown eyes were glossy with tears. She looked no older than 24. Dirt streaked her face, and sweat glistened on her forehead under the scorching sun. Her voice cracked. "I just need some food." Her words hit Jamal like a punch. He had expected her to beg for money. Most people did. But this was different. Her request was so raw, so human, so desperate, that Jamal felt a lump rise in his throat. He crouched down so he could look her in the eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Keisha," she whispered, clutching her belly tighter. I haven't eaten since yesterday. The baby's kicking, and it hurts." Her voice broke, and tears streamed down her face. Jamal glanced around. People were walking past, some throwing her pitying looks, others avoiding her entirely as though she didn't exist. Nobody stopped. Nobody cared. And that's when Jamal's own past came flooding back. He remembered being 10 years old, standing in line with his mother at a soup kitchen because they had no food at home. He remembered the shame, the hunger, the helplessness. He remembered the nights he slept hungry, promising himself that one day, if he ever got rich, he would never let another soul around him suffer the way he had. And now, fate had put this woman in his path. Jamal stood up and offered her his hand. "Come with me," he said firmly. Keisha froze. "What?" "I said, come with me," Jamal repeated. "You don't have to sit here anymore. Let's get you something to eat." Keisha hesitated, looking at him as if trying to decide whether to trust him. After all, strangers didn't just show kindness like this. And he wasn't just any stranger. He was obviously wealthy. What if this was a trick? But something in Jamal's tone was different. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was sincere. Slowly, Keisha placed her trembling hand in his. Jamal helped her to her feet. As they walked toward the car, people on the street whispered, "Isn't that Jamal Taylor, the tech guy? What's he doing with her? Maybe he's just giving her money." But Jamal ignored them all. He opened the door to his car, guided Keisha inside gently, and shut it. The air-conditioned luxury car was like another world compared to the scorching street outside. Keisha sat stiffly, her hands resting on her stomach, afraid to even touch the leather seats. As Jamal got into the driver's seat, he glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. "Relax," he said gently. "You're safe now." Keisha didn't respond, but her eyes filled with fresh tears. Jamal started the engine and pulled back into traffic. His mind was racing. He had meant to just get her some food, maybe give her money and be on his way. But now, looking at her fragile state, he knew he couldn't just drop her at a restaurant and leave. Something deep inside told him that this moment wasn't random. It was a test, and he wasn't going to fail. The entire drive, Keisha stayed quiet, occasionally glancing out the window as though afraid this might all be a dream. Jamal, meanwhile, tried to calm the storm in his mind. He wasn't sure why he felt so protective of her. All he knew was that he did. When they stopped at a red light, Jamal turned slightly toward her. "You said you haven't eaten since yesterday?" Keisha nodded. "Okay," he said. "First, we get you some food. Then we'll figure out what to do next." Keisha stared at him in shock. "And next?" she stammered. "You don't even know me." Jamal smiled faintly. "True," he said, "but I know what it feels like to be hungry. I know what it feels like to be left behind. And no one should have to go through that alone." For the first time since he'd seen her, Keisha's lips curved into a small, fragile smile. And at that exact moment, Jamal felt something shift inside him. He didn't know it yet, but this was a moment that would change his life forever. The car glided silently through the streets, but inside, the air was heavy with silence. Keisha sat stiffly, her back barely touching the seat. Her hands rested protectively over her round belly, as though shielding the baby from a world that had already been too cruel. Jamal glanced at her through the mirror, noticing how she wouldn't meet his eyes. She looked exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. There was a hollowness about her, as if she had given up on the idea that life could be kind. He cleared his throat softly, trying to break the tension. "So, Keisha," his voice was warm, careful, "where are you from?" Keisha blinked, as if no one had asked her that in a long time. "South Side," she said after a moment. "Born and raised." "South Side?" Jamal nodded. "I grew up a few blocks from there." That got her attention. She turned her head, slightly, surprised. "You?" "Yeah," Jamal said with a small smile. "People see me now and think I've always been this guy with the fancy cars and the expensive suits. But trust me, I know what it's like to go hungry. I know what it's like to wonder if tomorrow will be any better." Keisha's eyes softened a little. She didn't speak, but something about her shoulders relaxed. "Do you have family around?" Jamal asked gently. That one question seemed to hit her harder than he expected. Her lips trembled before she looked down. "No," she whispered. "No one." Keisha shook her head slowly. "When I told them I was pregnant, they said I had shamed them. They told me to leave." Jamal felt a flare of anger in his chest. He didn't even know these people, but the idea that they would abandon their daughter in her most vulnerable moment made his jaw tighten. "And the father?" Jamal asked cautiously. Keisha's laugh was bitter and short, almost like a sob. "He ran. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad. Said it wasn't his problem." Jamal's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had heard stories like this before, but hearing it from her, while she sat there, carrying the child alone, made it feel personal. "And now?" he asked softly. Keisha let out a shaky breath. "I've been sleeping wherever I can. Sometimes in the shelter, sometimes outside. I try to find food at churches or soup kitchens, but lately I can't even get that. People look at me like I did something wrong, like I chose this." She finally looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want my baby to live." Jamal felt his throat tighten. There was the raw truth. She wasn't asking for luxury. She wasn't asking for money. She was asking for life. He pulled into the parking lot of a quiet restaurant. Not a five-star one, just a cozy, clean place he knew served good, hearty meals. As he parked, he turned to face her. "Keisha," he said, his tone steady but full of emotion, "listen to me. What happened to you is not your fault, and you don't have to keep fighting this battle alone." Keisha blinked at him, confused. "Why? Why are you helping me?" It was a fair question. People like Jamal didn't usually stop for people like her. Jamal leaned back, staring at the steering wheel for a moment as if gathering his thoughts. "Because once upon a time," he said finally, "someone helped me when I had nothing. I was just a skinny kid with no money and no hope. And this older man, he gave me a chance. He believed in me when no one else did. If he hadn't, I wouldn't be here today." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "Maybe this is my chance to do the same for someone else." Keisha's lips parted in shock. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with respect, with kindness, with belief. She swallowed hard. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything yet, Jamal said gently. First, let's get you fed. He stepped out, walked around, and opened the car door for her like a gentleman. Keisha hesitated before taking his hand and stepping out. Inside the restaurant, heads turned, a well-dressed millionaire and a pregnant woman in worn-out clothes made for an unusual pair. But Jamal didn't care. He guided her to a quiet corner booth and told the waiter, "Bring her anything she wants, and make it quick." Keisha stared at the menu, overwhelmed. She couldn't remember the last time she had been inside a real restaurant. "Order whatever you feel like," Jamal encouraged. I don't want to take advantage," Keisha said softly. "You're not," Jamal replied. "Tonight, you eat until you're full. No guilt, no shame." Tears blurred her vision as she finally chose a simple meal: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and water. When the food came, she ate slowly at first, as though afraid someone might take it away. Jamal noticed and said, "You're safe. Take your time." As she ate, he asked her more about her life, not because he was prying, but because he wanted to understand her better. She told him about working 2 jobs before she got pregnant, about her dreams of becoming a nurse, about how her world fell apart when her boyfriend abandoned her. And with every word she spoke, Jamal's respect for her grew. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a victim. She was a fighter, surviving each day with nothing but sheer willpower. When she finished eating, Keisha sat back, looking almost guilty. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No one's been this kind to me in a long time." Jamal smiled softly. "Get used to it," he said. Keisha frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jamal said, leaning forward, "I'm not done helping you. Tonight, you're not going back to the street." Her eyes widened. "But where will I go?" "You'll stay somewhere safe," Jamal said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." Keisha stared at him, speechless. For the first time in months, hope flickered in her chest. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew something powerful had just begun, a bond that would change both of their lives forever. The restaurant had grown quieter as the evening wore on. The plates were empty now, but Jamal and Keisha stayed seated, almost reluctant to move. Jamal leaned back, studying the young woman across from him. Her face was no longer tight with hunger, but there was still something in her eyes, a mix of fear and uncertainty. "Keisha," he said carefully, "do you have anywhere at all you can stay tonight?" Keisha hesitated. She hated this question because it always ended the same way. "No," she whispered, "not unless the shelter has space." But they turn people away most nights. Jamal's chest tightened. He imagined her, 8 months pregnant, trying to find a corner of concrete to sleep on, hugging her belly for warmth. The thought made him clench his jaw. He took a deep breath. "Then you're not going back there," he said finally. His voice was calm, but there was a quiet authority in it, the kind of tone he used when sealing a business deal. Keisha blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jamal said, leaning forward, "you're coming with me. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere you can sleep without fear. Somewhere you don't have to worry about food." Keisha's eyes widened, her fork clattering softly against the table. "What?" "You heard me," Jamal said firmly. "You've been out there long enough. You and that baby deserve better." Keisha's hands trembled. "I can't. I mean, I don't even know you." Jamal softened his tone. "I know, and you don't have to trust me right away. But trust this, I won't hurt you. I won't let anything happen to you. Not while you're with me." She stared at him for a long moment, her heart racing. For months, the only thing she had known was rejection, judgment, and survival. Now this stranger, this millionaire, was offering her safety, comfort, maybe even dignity. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why are you doing this?" Jamal sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I can," he admitted. "Because when I was younger, nobody saved me. Nobody stopped when I was hungry. I had to fight my way out alone. And maybe that made me strong, but it also made me hard. I don't want to be that man anymore. If I can make your life just a little easier, I will." Keisha's lips quivered. tears springing to her eyes. For a moment, she was quiet, torn between fear and hope. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. Jamal felt something in his chest ease. He stood, walked around a table, and offered her his hand. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers small and cold in his. The restaurant staff watched curiously as Jamal guided Keisha outside. Some of them recognized him. They whispered, wondering why a man like him was helping a homeless pregnant woman. As they stepped into the night, a light breeze brushed against Keisha's face. She hugged herself, suddenly overwhelmed by the realization that she was about to step into a world completely different from the one she had known. When Jamal opened the door to his Rolls-Royce and helped her in, a couple walking by stopped and stared. "Is that Jamal Taylor?" the man whispered. "Yeah," the woman replied, astonished. "And look who he's with." By the time Jamal got behind the wheel, he could feel the stares, the judgment from strangers on the sidewalk. But he didn't care. He started the car and drove into the night determined. The city lights flickered across Keisha's face as they drove. She stayed quiet, still processing what had just happened. Jamal glanced at her and said, "You're safe now. That's all you need to think about tonight." But as they left the rougher side of town and entered the wealthy district, Keisha's unease grew. The streets became cleaner, the houses larger, and the cars more expensive. She gripped her dress, feeling completely out of place. Jamal noticed. "Hey," he said gently, "you don't need to be scared. Nobody here is going to hurt you." Keisha gave him a small nod, but stayed quiet. After half an hour, they pulled up to tall iron gates. As they swung open, Keisha's breath caught in her throat. Ahead of them stood a mansion, wide, elegant, glowing with warm lights. She turned to Jamal in shock. This is where you live?" Jamal smiled faintly. Home sweet home. When they stepped inside, Keisha felt like she had walked into a dream. The marble floors gleamed, the air smelled faintly of vanilla and fresh flowers, and everything was so clean, so quiet, so peaceful that she almost felt unworthy of being there. She stood frozen in the foyer until Jamal gently touched her elbow. "You're shaking," he said softly. "Do you want to sit down?" Keisha nodded numbly, allowing him to guide her to a plush sofa in the living room. She sat at the very edge, afraid she might dirty it. Jamal crouched in front of her, his expression gentle. "Keisha," he said, "you don't have to be scared. No one here is judging you. Not me, not my staff. You're safe." Her lips trembled. I've never been anywhere like this. I feel like I don't belong." "You belong," Jamal said firmly. "At least for tonight, you belong right here." Keisha pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the baby kick softly. For the first time in months, she let herself cry, not just from hunger or fear, but from the strange relief washing over her. Jamal stayed kneeling, watching her cry silently, his heart breaking and healing all at once. That night, he had one of the guest rooms prepared for her, fresh sheets, soft pillows, warm blankets. When she saw the bed, she almost collapsed with gratitude. "I don't remember the last time I slept in a real bed," she whispered. "Then tonight, you'll sleep well," Jamal said. Before he left her to rest, Keisha said quietly, "Thank you. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." Jamal gave her a small nod. "You don't owe me anything, Keisha. Just take care of yourself and that baby. That's all I want." As he closed the door and walked down the hallway, Jamal felt something stirring inside him. This wasn't just charity anymore. This was personal. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. This was not the last time he would help her. The guest room was quiet, almost too quiet. Keisha lay on the soft bed, staring at the ceiling, still unable to believe where she was. The room smelled faintly of lavender. The sheets were crisp and warm, and for the first time in months, she didn't have to keep one hand on her belly while she slept, afraid that someone might hurt her or the baby during the night. But sleep didn't come easily. Instead, memories came rushing back, one after another, each one more painful than the last. It hadn't always been this way. Keisha had once believed in love, in building a family, in a future full of hope. She had met Darren at a small community event. He was charming, smooth-talking, with a laugh that made her heart skip. Darren wasn't rich, but he was ambitious, full of dreams, and he made Keisha feel like she was the only woman in the world. They would spend hours walking along the river after his shift, holding hands, talking about life. He told her he wanted to open his own business one day, maybe move them out of the neighborhood. Keisha had fallen for him completely. She gave him her heart, and eventually her trust. When she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified at first, but also a little excited. She had imagined telling Darren and seeing his face light up. She imagined him holding their baby, them building a family together. But when she finally told him, his reaction shattered everything. They were sitting on the small couch in her apartment when she broke the news. "Darren, I'm pregnant." For a moment, there was silence. Then Darren's expression darkened. "Pregnant?" he repeated, as if the word itself offended him. Keisha nodded, clutching the edge of the couch nervously. "I know it's a lot, but we can figure this out. I can still work. We'll make it work." Darren stood abruptly, pacing the room. "Keisha, I told you I wasn't ready for kids yet. I can barely take care of myself." "You said we'd build a future together," she whispered. "That was before this," he snapped. The argument that followed still echoed in her mind, his angry words, her tears, the moment he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He never came back. The next day, his phone was disconnected. His friend said he had moved out of state. Keisha had been left completely alone. When she told her family, hoping for support, she was met with even colder rejection. "You've embarrassed us, Keisha," her mother said, her voice sharp as a knife. "You know we raised you better than this." Keisha tried to explain, tried to tell them Darren had abandoned her, but it didn't matter. "You can't stay here," her uncle said firmly. "We won't have you bringing shame to this house." And just like that, she was kicked out. She packed what little she owned into a single duffel bag and left, her tears blurring the streetlights as she walked. At first, she tried to find work. She cleaned houses, washed dishes at diners, did anything she could survive. But as her belly grew, fewer and fewer people were willing to hire her. Landlords refused to rent to her without a job. Shelters were full most nights, and soon her money ran out. She started sleeping in abandoned buildings, on park benches, sometimes in bus stations where she wouldn't be chased out. The stares from strangers were the worst. Some looked at her with pity, others with disgust, as though she had chosen this life. She learned to keep her head down, to avoid eye contact, to make herself invisible. But no matter how bad things got, Keisha never begged for money. She begged for food only when she absolutely had to, when her baby kicked and she feared for its life. And that was where Jamal had found her. A tear slipped down Keisha's cheek as she turned on her side, one hand resting on her stomach. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her baby. "I'm trying. Mommy's trying." The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her it was still there, still fighting with her. Keisha wiped her face and stared at the door. She didn't know why Jamal was helping her. Maybe he was just being kind. Maybe tomorrow he would change his mind and send her away. But for tonight, she was safe. And that small piece of safety felt like the most precious gift she had ever received. Down the hall, Jamal sat in his study, staring at a glass of water on his desk. He couldn't stop thinking about her story. The way her voice broke when she talked about being abandoned, the quiet strength in her eyes despite everything she had faced. He remembered the times he had gone hungry as a boy, how he had to steal food just to keep his little sister from crying at night. He had promised himself then that if he ever made it big, he would help others. And now, sitting here, he realized this was the first time he had ever truly done it. Not just writing a check to a charity, not just sponsoring a school program, but stepping into someone's life and changing it. And for some reason, it felt right. It felt like this was exactly what he was meant to do. Jamal glanced toward the hallway, where the guest room light glowed softly. "Sleep well, Keisha," he murmured. "Tomorrow everything changes." Morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Jamal's mansion, flooding the halls with a warm golden glow. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and freshly baked bread from the kitchen. Keisha woke slowly, her body sinking into the soft mattress. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The quiet was too perfect, too peaceful. Then she remembered the marble floors, Jamal's kind eyes, the way it told her she wouldn't have to sleep on the street again. Her throat tightened as she placed a hand over her belly. For the first time in months, she had slept through the night without fear. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she said hesitantly. The door opened and one of the house staff stepped in, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Good morning, Miss Keisha. Mr. Taylor asked me to bring you something." Keisha sat up as a woman and placed a tray on the nightstand. Scrambled eggs, toast fruit, and a glass of orange juice. "Breakfast?" Keisha whispered, her voice shaking. "Yes," the woman said kindly. "He wanted to make sure you eat first thing in the morning." Keisha blinked back tears. No one had cared this much about her in a long time. After eating, she took a deep breath and walked nervously downstairs. The mansion was so big it almost intimidated her. She found Jamal in the living room, dressed casually in a black t-shirt and jeans, sipping coffee as he read something on his tablet. When he saw her, he set aside immediately. "Morning," he said with a smile. "How did you sleep?" Keisha hesitated, then admitted softly, "Better than I have in months." "Good." Jamal gestured for her to sit. "We have a lot to talk about." Keisha perched on the edge of the sofa, clutching her hands together. "Keisha," Jamal began, leaning forward, "I know yesterday was overwhelming. You've been through more than anyone should have to face alone. But from now on, you don't have to face it alone." Keisha frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jamal said firmly, "I'm not just giving you one night of safety. I want to make sure you're safe until that baby is born, and beyond. You'll have a place to stay, healthy food, doctor visits if you need them. Whatever it takes, we'll make sure you and your child are okay." Keisha's mouth fell open. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can," Jamal said honestly. "Because I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you. And because," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "because no mother should have to wonder where her next meal is coming from while she's carrying life inside her." Keisha's lips trembled. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me anything," Jamal said, shaking his head. "I'm not doing this for payback. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do." At that moment, the chef entered the room, carrying a basket of fresh fruit. He froze when he saw Keisha, clearly surprised. "Morning, Chef," Jamal said casually. "This is Keisha. She's staying with us for a while. Make sure she has whatever she needs." The chef nodded politely, though his eyebrows were slightly raised. It wasn't every day the boss invited strangers into his home, especially not someone who clearly came from the streets. When the chef left, Keisha looked down at her lap. "Your staff, they must think I'm crazy." "Let them think what they want," Jamal said calmly. "This is my house. My rules." Keisha bit her lip, fighting back tears. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Jamal said softly. "You're someone who needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's not a burden. That's a blessing." For a long moment, Keisha just sat there staring at him. Then, without warning, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought I was invisible," she whispered. "For months, I felt like nobody saw me. Like I didn't matter." Jamal's chest tightened. He moved from his chair and knelt in front of her, just like he had when he first saw her on the roadside. "Keisha," he said quietly, "you matter. You and that baby both matter. And I promise you, as long as you're under this roof, you will never feel invisible again." Keisha let out a choked sob. Jamal handed her a handkerchief, his eyes steady and kind. "I don't want you to just survive, Keisha," he continued. "I want you to live, to have the chance to dream again, to hope again." Keisha wiped her face and gave a shaky laugh. "You talk like someone who knows what that feels like." Jamal smiled faintly. "I do. I was invisible once, too." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an unspoken understanding that this was more than charity. This was the start of something neither of them had expected. Later that morning, Jamal called his driver and arranged for Keisha to see a doctor. "You need a checkup," he said. We have to make sure you and the baby are healthy." Keisha nodded, still overwhelmed but grateful. When they left the mansion, neighbors and paparazzi who often lingered outside caught sight of them. Cameras clicked. People whispered. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "Why is Jamal Taylor walking with her?" another asked. Keisha felt every stare like a dagger, but Jamal placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Don't look at them," he said softly. "Look at me. You're fine." And for the first time in a long time, she believed him. That evening, Jamal stood on the balcony of his mansion, staring out at the city lights. His phone buzzed. It was a business partner calling, but he let it go to voicemail. This was bigger than business. He thought about Keisha, sleeping peacefully down the hall, about the life growing inside her. He knew what people would say, that he was crazy, that he was being taken advantage of, that this wasn't his responsibility. But Jamal didn't care. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was exactly what he was supposed to do. He whispered into the night, as though making a vow to himself. "I won't fail her. Not her, not that baby." It was a promise that would soon change everything, not just for Keisha, but for Jamal himself. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into a month. Keisha's belly grew rounder, but so did the warmth in her heart. For the first time since she'd been abandoned, she woke up each day without fear. Jamal had kept his word. He took her to every doctor's appointment, made sure she had nutritious meals, and even hired a maternity coach to help her prepare for motherhood. But Jamal noticed something. Even with all the security, Keisha kept her distance emotionally. She always said, "Thank you," but there was a hesitation in her voice, like she was afraid to get too comfortable, too happy. One evening, Jamal was in his study, staring at a business contract he couldn't bring himself to sign. His mind kept drifting to Keisha, the way she smiled shyly when the baby kicked, the way she still folded her clothes neatly and tried to help the staff despite being treated like a guest. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. This isn't just about helping her survive anymore, he thought. This is about building a life together. For years, Jamal had been a man who avoided commitment. Business was safer than love. Deals couldn't betray you, and numbers didn't leave you for someone richer. But Keisha was different. She was real. He didn't just want her to stay under his roof. He wanted her to stay in his life. The next evening, Jamal invited Keisha for a walk through the mansion's garden. The air smelled of roses, and the sunset painted the sky a warm shade of gold and pink. "You've been quiet lately," Jamal said as they strolled slowly along the stone path. Keisha shrugged, her hands resting on her belly. "I guess I'm just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For this to end," she said softly. "For the moment you tell me I've overstayed my welcome. People like me don't get fairy tales, Jamal. Not in real life." Jamal stopped walking and turned to face her. "Keisha," he said gently, "what if I told you I don't want this to end?" She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Jamal took a deep breath. His heart pounded so loud he thought she might hear it. "I don't just want to help you until the baby's born. I want to help you raise that baby. I want to be there for every first step, every birthday. I want you in my life permanently." Keisha blinked, stunned. "Jamal," she whispered. Before she could say more, Jamal reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He dropped to one knee right there on the garden path. The light from the setting sun bathed him in a golden glow. "Keisha," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You walked into my life on a day I wasn't looking for anyone. But somehow, you became the one person I can't imagine living without. I don't care about your past. I don't care how the world sees us. I care about you, about us, and about the family we can be." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Keisha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat and the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. "Jamal," she said again, tears welling up, "you can't mean this." "I mean every word," Jamal said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing this because I love you." Keisha's knees felt weak. She sank down to sit on the edge of the stone fountain nearby, her tears falling freely now. I'm not used to this, she admitted. I've been abandoned so many times. People leave me when I need them most. How do I know you won't wake up one day and regret this? You don't, Jamal said softly, coming to sit beside her. But I can promise you this. I've never been more sure about anything in my life. You don't have to believe the world. Just believe me. Keisha looked at the ring. It wasn't the size that moved her. It was the sincerity in his voice, the steadiness in his eyes. Finally, she nodded, her tears turning into shaky laughter. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jamal. I'll marry you. Jamal's smile broke wide and genuine, the kind of smile that reaches eyes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her belly. Keisha rested her head against his shoulder, still half in disbelief. I don't know what I did to deserve this, she murmured. You existed, Jamal said simply. That's enough. When they returned to the mansion, the household staff gathered in the hall, having heard the news. Some were shocked. It wasn't every day their boss proposed to someone they had found on the street. But Jamal spoke clearly and firmly. Keisha is not just my guest anymore. She is my fiancée. I expect everyone here to treat her with the same respect you show me. The staff nodded, some smiling softly, others still surprised but willing to accept it. Keisha felt her cheeks flush. She had gone from being invisible on the streets to standing proudly beside a man who publicly claimed her as his future wife. Later that night, Jamal arranged a small dinner for just the two of them. Soft music played in the background, and candles flickered on the dining table. To new beginnings, Jamal said, raising his glass of sparkling water. To new beginnings, Keisha echoed, smiling through tears. They ate slowly, talking about baby names, future plans, and even joking about how shocked the world would be when the news got out. For the first time in a very long time, Keisha allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for happiness. As Keisha lay in bed that night, she stared at the ring on her finger. It sparkled faintly under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She placed her hand over her belly and whispered, "Little one, we're going to be okay. We have a home now. We have love." Down the hall, Jamal stood on the balcony looking out at the stars. His chest felt lighter than it had in years. He had money, cars, businesses, but tonight he felt like the richest man alive. The morning after Jamal's proposal, news spread like wildfire. It started with a single leaked photo, a blurry shot of Jamal kneeling before Keisha in the garden, holding out the ring. Within hours, gossip blogs picked it up. By noon, it was on every major social media platform, and by evening, the story made local news headlines. Young millionaire engaged a homeless pregnant woman. The internet exploded. Comments flooded in. What is he thinking? She's a gold digger. Look at her clothes. There are thousands of women who would kill to be with him, and he picks her? Some defended Jamal, praising him for his compassion. True love sees beyond status. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But the hate was louder, sharper, crueler. Memes were made mocking Keisha's appearance. Strangers called her names, questioned her character, and speculated about who the father of her baby really was. Keisha sat in Jamal's living room scrolling through her phone, her heart sinking lower with every comment she read. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jamal, who had been standing by the window taking a business call, noticed her trembling hands and knelt beside her. "Stop reading that garbage," he said gently, taking the phone from her. "But they're right," Keisha said through tears. "Look at me, Jamal. I'm nothing like you. I don't belong in your world." Jamal took her face in his hands and made her look at him. "Keisha, listen to me. I don't care what they say. I care about what's here." He placed her hand on his chest where his heart was beating fast. This is what matters. But it wasn't just strangers online who had opinions. That weekend, Jamal's mother came to visit. She was a dignified woman, elegant and soft-spoken, but the look on her face when she saw Keisha said everything before she even spoke. "Jamal," she said, pulling him aside, "is this true? You're marrying her?" "Yes, Mom," Jamal replied calmly. "I am." His mother frowned, glancing back at Keisha. Do you know what people are saying? Do you know how this will affect our family's name? Jamal's jaw tightened. Mom, our name doesn't need protecting. It needs meaning. This is what I want. His mother's expression softened, but her voice was still firm. I raise you be compassionate, Jamal, but marriage is a lifetime decision. Are you sure this isn't just pity? It's not pity, Jamal said, shaking his head. I love her. His mother studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Then stand by her, even when the world turns against you. The criticism didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Paparazzi began following Keisha every time she stepped outside the mansion. They shouted cruel questions at her. Are you just after his money? What will you do when he leaves you? Who's the real father? One day, after a particularly nasty encounter outside a grocery store, Keisha locked herself in the guest room and refused to come out. Keisha, please open the door, Jamal said from the hallway. You don't understand, she cried. I can't live like this, Jamal. They're tearing me apart. Maybe I should just go. Jamal's chest tightened. He leaned his forehead against the door. If you leave now, he said quietly, they win. The people who laughed at you on the street, the ones who think you don't deserve happiness, they win. Is that what you want? There was silence for a moment. Then Keisha's muffled voice came through the door. I don't want to ruin your life. Jamal's voice was steady, but there was emotion in it now. Keisha, you are not ruining my life. You are saving it. The door opened slowly, and Keisha stepped out, tears streaking her face. Jamal pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. The next day, Jamal made a bold move. He scheduled a press conference outside his mansion. The front yard was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as he stepped up to the microphone with Keisha by his side. I know there's been a lot of talk about my engagement, he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. So, let me make something clear. I am not ashamed of the woman I love. Keisha is the strongest, bravest person I have ever met. She has faced hardships most of you could never imagine, and she has done it with grace and dignity. If you can't respect her, then you don't respect me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jamal reached for Keisha's hand and held it high. This is the woman I'm going to marry, he said firmly. And if anyone has a problem with that, I suggest you look in the mirror and ask yourself why someone else's happiness bothers you so much. It was a moment that went viral within hours. Some people still criticize him, but many more praise him for taking a stand. The narrative began to shift. That night, Keisha sat with Jamal on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Why did you do that? She asked softly. Because I'm tired of letting strangers control our story, Jamal replied. From now on, we write it ourselves. Keisha leaned her head on his shoulder, a small smile tugging at her lips. You really mean it when you say you don't care what they think, don't you? I don't, Jamal said. I care about you, about this baby, about the life we're building together. And in that moment, despite the noise of the world outside, Keisha felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. But just when it seemed things were settling down, a new headline appeared the following morning that threatened to shake everything again. Mystery man claims to be father of Keisha's baby, demands to speak to Jamal. Keisha's hand flew to her mouth as she read it. Jamal's eyes darkened with determination. This isn't over, he said. But whatever comes next, we face it together. The morning of the wedding was warm and bright, the kind of day that felt like a promise from the universe. Birds chirped outside the window as Keisha sat in front of a mirror, staring at her reflection. She could barely recognize herself. Her hair had been styled into soft waves that framed her face. A simple but elegant white gown hugged her figure, her baby bump gently visible beneath the fabric. She was glowing, not just with the light of motherhood, but with something deeper, dignity, hope, and love. Tears pricked her eyes as she touched the edge of the veil. I never thought I'd see this day, she whispered. The makeup artist smiled softly. You deserve it, she said. Jamal had insisted the wedding be held at the community center, where Keisha used to sleep when she was homeless. This is where it all began, he told her when he shared the plan. And this is where I want to celebrate what we've built. The community center had been transformed into something magical. White drapes hung from the ceiling, fairy lights twinkled along the walls, and rows of chairs were filled with neighbors, journalists, and people who had once seen Keisha begging on the streets. Some of them still couldn't believe it. "That's really her?" someone whispered as Keisha walked in. "Yes," another replied softly. "Look at her now." The music began, a gentle piano melody that echoed through the hall. Keisha's heart pounded as she took her first step down the aisle. Every eye was on her, but for the first time in her life, she didn't feel ashamed. She held her head high, clutching the small bouquet of white roses Jamal had chosen for her. When she finally saw him, standing tall at the altar in a crisp black suit, her breath caught. Jamal's eyes softened, his smile full of pride. He had seen her at her lowest, and now he was watching her shine. When she reached him, he reached out his hand. She placed hers in his, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. The officiant cleared his throat and began, but when it was time for the vows, Jamal asked if he could speak from the heart. "I met Keisha on a street corner," he said, his deep voice carrying across the hall. She was scared, hungry, and ready to give up, and yet, even then, she had a strength in her that I couldn't ignore. She reminded me of who I used to be, someone fighting just to survive. He turned to Keisha, his eyes glistening. "You gave me more than love, Keisha. You gave me purpose. And I promise, for as long as I live, you will never face another storm alone. I will be your shelter, your partner, your biggest supporter." Gasps and sniffles filled the room. Keisha's hands trembled as she spoke her own vows. "Jamal," she said, her voice soft but steady, "when you found me, I was broken. I thought my life was over. But you saw me when no one else would. You gave me a home, not just a house. You gave me hope. And now you've given me love. I promise to stand by you, to believe in you, even when the world doesn't. And I promise to love this family we're building with everything I have." By the time she finished, many in the audience were wiping tears. "By the power vested in me," the officiant declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jamal cupped Keisha's face gently and kissed her. The room erupted in applause, cheers, and even some sobs. Flashbulbs from cameras went off as journalists captured the moment. Within hours, the photo will be shared across social media with captions like, "From homeless to a bride, Keisha's journey is giving us all hope. True love still exists." Instead of a luxury reception, Jamal hosted a community feast right there in the center. Long tables were lined with food for everyone, guests, neighbors, and even strangers who had walked in off the street. "This is for all of us," Jamal announced as he stood up to make a toast. Because love isn't just about two people. It's about lifting each other up, about proving that we are more than what the world says we are. Cheers went up from the crowd. Keisha looked around and saw people smiling, laughing, dancing. For the first time, she didn't feel like the pregnant beggar. She felt like a woman who had been chosen, cherished, and celebrated. Later that night, after the guests had gone home, Keisha stood alone in the quiet hall. She looked around at the now empty chairs and thought of all the nights she had slept here, shivering, wondering how she would make it to the next day. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "You made it," she whispered to herself. "You really made it." Jamal walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. "I was just thinking about how far I've come," she said softly. "I used to sit in that corner and pray for a miracle. I guess God sent me one." Jamal kissed the top of her head. Maybe we were each other's miracle. The wedding video went viral online. News anchors replayed clips of the vows, calling it the wedding of the year. Celebrities even shared the story, praising Jamal and Keisha for showing that love transcends class and status. For once, the internet wasn't mocking Keisha. It was celebrating her. She's proof that you can rise from rock bottom and still find happiness. One influencer tweeted, "This is what real love looks like." Another wrote, "But just when everything seemed perfect, life threw them a curveball." As Jamal and Keisha prepared to leave for their short honeymoon, a man appeared at the entrance of the community center, tall, angry, and demanding to speak with Keisha. "I'm the father of that baby," he shouted. And I'm not going to let some rich guy raise my child. Gasps rippled through the guests who were still cleaning up. Jamal stepped forward, his jaw tight, his protective instincts kicking in. "This is our wedding day," he said coldly. "You need to leave." But Keisha's face had gone pale. Her past had finally come knocking. The celebration had just ended, and the hall was still glowing with leftover warmth from the wedding. Guests lingered, stacking chairs and chatting in small groups. Keisha stood near the stage, clutching Jamal's hand, her heart still racing from the vows. It felt like a dream until the voice cut through the air. "Keisha." The sound was sharp, angry, and filled with a pain that made the entire hall fall silent. A tall, gaunt man stood at the doorway. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands clenched into fists. Everyone turned to look at him. Keisha's breath caught. Her grip on Jamal's hand tightened. "Who is that?" someone whispered. The man stalked forward, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. His voice was raw as he spoke. "I'm the father of that baby," he spat, pointing at Keisha's belly. "And I'm not letting some rich man raise my child like I never existed." A ripple of gasps went through the hall. Jamal stepped in front of Keisha instantly, shielding her. His usually calm face hardened, his protective side rising like a storm. "This is our wedding day," he said evenly. "You need to leave before you ruin it for everyone." But the man just laughed bitterly. "Oh, I already ruined it the moment I walked in," he sneered. "Keisha, you didn't tell him about me, did you? Didn't tell him you were mine first." Keisha flinched, her throat tightening. Her past, the one she had tried so hard to escape, was now standing in front of her, demanding to be acknowledged. "Please, don't do this," she whispered. "Don't do what?" "Tell the truth." The man's voice cracked. "You think you can just walk away from me, start a new life like I'm dead?" Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "You left me," she said, her voice trembling. "You left me when I needed you most. You knew I was pregnant and you disappeared. I begged you to stay to help me, but you care more about your addictions than your child." The man's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "I was messed up," he said hoarsely, "but I've been clean for months. I want to make things right." "This is not the place," Jamal said firmly, his voice like steel. "If you truly want to be involved, we can talk tomorrow, in private. But tonight, my wife deserves peace." The man's eyes burned with resentment. "Wife," he repeated bitterly. "So that's it? You marry her and suddenly I'm nobody." "You became nobody," Jamal shot back, his voice calm but cold, "when you abandoned her on the street. I picked her up when you left her to starve. I stayed when you walked away." The hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. People in the hall began to murmur. Some were angry at the man for ruining such a beautiful day. Others were curious, whispering about the scandal unfolding before their eyes. Keisha could feel all of it, the stares, the judgment, the shame she had worked so hard to bury. Suddenly, she couldn't take it anymore. "Stop," she cried out, her voice ringing through the hall. Everyone fell silent again. She stepped forward, her veil slightly slipping off, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, this man is a biological father," she said, her voice shaking. "But biology isn't everything. A real father doesn't just give you life. He stays, he protects, he loves. Jamal has been more of a father to this child than you ever were." Keisha turned to face the man fully, her shoulders squared. "I begged you to be there for me. I begged you to stop hurting yourself and me, and you chose to walk away. That was your choice. You don't get to come back now on the happiest day of my life and destroy everything I built." The man swallowed hard. For a moment, the anger in his eyes softened into guilt. "You really love him?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Jamal. "With everything I am," Keisha said. "And you really think he'll be a better father than me?" Keisha took Jamal's hand and placed it over her stomach. "He already is." The man looked at them for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. Then, slowly, he stepped back. I wanted to see her one last time," he murmured. "I needed to know she was okay." "She's going to be more than okay," Jamal said quietly. "But if you really want to be a part of her life, you need to prove it. Get steady. Stay clean. Show up when it counts. That's the only way. The man's shoulders slumped. Without another word, he turned and walked out the hall. The door closed softly behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the guests began to clap, not for the man's exit, but for Keisha's courage. "You were incredible," one of the neighbors whispered as they passed by. "You showed strength we all wish we had," another said. As soon as the last guest left, Keisha collapsed into Jamal's arms, sobbing. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I thought he was going to take everything away from me." "He can't take what's ours," Jamal said softly, holding her close. "No one can. We built this love from nothing. And nothing is stronger than that." Keisha wiped her tears and managed a small smile. "You really mean that?" "With all my heart," Jamal said. That night, as they drove home from the hall, Keisha leaned against Jamal's shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt completely safe. But she also knew that this wasn't the end of her story. The man's words lingered in her mind. Could he really change? Would he try to come back into their lives again? One thing was certain. No matter what came next, she wasn't facing alone anymore. She had Jamal. She had love. And soon, she would have a family that was hers forever. Months passed after the dramatic wedding night confrontation. The seasons changed, and with them, so did Keisha's world. She was no longer the frightened girl sitting on a cold sidewalk, begging for spare change. She was now Mrs. Keisha Thompson, living in a beautiful home, waking up every morning next to the man who had not just saved her life, but given her a new one. And now, the moment she had been waiting for was finally here. It was early morning when Keisha felt the first sharp pain. At first, she thought it was just another restless night, but then she felt it again, stronger, deeper. "Jamal," she whispered, shaking him gently. He opened his eyes instantly, always alert when it came to her. "It's time," she said, tears in her eyes, half from pain, half from joy. Jamal jumped out of bed, so fast he nearly tripped over the rug. Okay, let's go," he said, trying to sound calm but failing as he grabbed the hospital bag they had packed weeks earlier. Keisha chuckled weakly. "You look more nervous than I feel." The drive to the hospital felt like a scene out of a movie. Jamal kept glancing at her every few seconds, his hand gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. "Breathe, baby. Just breathe," he kept repeating. "I am breathing," Keisha said between contractions, rolling her eyes. "You're the one who looks like you're about to pass out." Despite the pain, she laughed, and for a brief moment they both did. Hours later, Keisha lay in the delivery room, sweat glistening on her forehead. Nurses moved around her quickly, and Jamal never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction. "You're doing amazing," he whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. Keisha gritted her teeth. "If you say that one more time, I'm going to throw something at you," she joked through the pain. Jamal laughed softly, kissing her hand. "Noted." The hours stretched on, but finally, the room filled with the sweet, sharp cry of a newborn. The nurse gently placed a tiny baby girl in Keisha's arms. "She's perfect," Keisha whispered, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the little life she had carried for 9 long months. Jamal leaned over, his own eyes wet. "Hey, princess," he said softly, brushing a finger against the baby's tiny hand. "I'm your dad." The baby's small fist curled around his finger, and something inside Jamal's heart shifted forever. "What should we name her?" Keisha asked softly. Jamal smiled. "I was thinking, Hope, because she's the reason you kept going. And the reason I changed, too." Keisha's tears fell harder. "Hope Thompson," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. "Welcome to the world, baby girl." That night, after the nurses left and the baby was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, Keisha lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling. "I can't believe this is my life now," she said quietly. Jamal sat beside her, gently rubbing her hand. "You earned this life, Keisha. You fought for it every single day. And you never gave up, even when you wanted to." Keisha turned to him, her eyes soft. I think I think I finally believe I deserve to be happy. You do, Jamal said firmly, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life reminding you of that. A few days later, as Keisha and Jamal prepared to leave the hospital, they received an unexpected visitor. The man who had shown up at their wedding stood in the hallway, looking nervous. He looked cleaner now, calmer, like he had been trying to turn his life around. "I just wanted to see her," he said quietly. "Just once." Keisha hesitated, then nodded. He stepped closer and looked at the baby in her arms. His eyes softened. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Keisha nodded. "She is. And if you're serious about changing, about staying clean, maybe one day you can be a part of her life, but not until you're ready." The man nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I understand. Thank you for not hating me." Keisha smiled faintly. "Hating you would just hurt me more. I'm done with pain. I'm choosing peace now." When they finally brought Hope home, Keisha stood in the nursery Jamal had designed for her. Soft pastel walls, a white crib, and a mobile that played gentle lullabies. She placed Hope in the crib and just stood there, tears in her eyes. Jamal came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That I can't believe how far we've come," she said. "From sleeping on a sidewalk to this." Jamal kissed her cheek. "We're just getting started." Weeks later, Jamal and Keisha agreed to do a short interview with a local news station that had been following their story since the wedding. "What do you want people to take away from your journey?" the reporter asked. Keisha looked into the camera, holding Hope in her arms. "That no matter how low you are, no matter how hopeless life feels, there's always a way back," she said softly. "Sometimes you just need one person to believe in you. Jamal was that person for me. But you can also be that person for yourself." The video went viral, inspiring thousands of comments from viewers who said Keisha's story gave them strength to keep going. One quiet evening, Keisha and Jamal sat on the porch, watching the sunset as baby Hope slept nearby. "You know," Jamal said thoughtfully, "the day I met you was the day my life truly started." Keisha smiled, leaning against him. "And the day you loved me was the day I finally loved myself." They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the night sounds, feeling the peace that had taken years to find. For Keisha, this wasn't just the end of her story. It was the beginning of a brand new one. And this time, she wasn't facing it alone.